So, welcome to Unholy Health, episode 8. Usual hosts, me and...
But yeah, you're back now.
I'm back. After my, I don't know, hiatus, is that what they call it?
Because I think we filmed about 2 weeks ago because I was then away all last week. It was about a 3-week hiatus.
Yeah, I just quietly went and had a nervous breakdown and here I am back.
And that's why today we're talking about therapy.
Talking about therapy. All kinds of therapies, because I think it's interesting that there's so much of it around now.
Yeah, what I found interesting is when you said we were going to talk about therapy, I just thought like therapy as in psychologists and psychiatrists. And then when you said, well, you've done physical therapy, that doesn't even come to my mind. Therapy now is so ingrained of I just think it is mental, but it's actually so much more holistic.
Yeah, we'll talk about them later on, but I've done a bunch of physical therapies where particularly some of the more new agey ones where the therapist will comment that people will cry or do have all kinds of like emotional responses to physical therapy. So it's an interesting question about how much of it is brain versus body, because I mean it's all connected, right?
Well, yeah, actually when you say that, I've seen the ones on TikTok of these like energy movers and that sort of thing. And it's like Reiki almost, and people are like hysterically bawling their eyes out and having like convulsions.
Yeah.
So that you really go like, well, they're not actually even touching the person. So is this physical at all, or is it all just energy and mental? It's so intertwined.
How much of it is just in your head, right?
Yeah, and that, like, I think the one thing with therapy is so many people will say something is a placebo, but I don't think it matters. If it works and it's a placebo, that almost is so many like therapies when you talk to someone. And so the placebo effect and the kind of discussion around placebo in therapy and mental health, I find incredibly interesting.
And placebos are the most researched thing in the world because every test has a placebo as its comparison, right? So
yeah, it's hilarious. We would always still say the placebo is just a placebo, even though there is so much research about it.
Yeah, but no, it's a real thing. One of the, just on that sort of topic about how the research works, one of the things that disturbs me about a lot of the research they do for things like, let's claim that red wine is good for you, or let's claim that chocolate is good for you. And when they want to have an ingredient and make a claim that it's healthy, what they'll do is they'll run tests where they just they test all kinds of things. So like they'll say, let's test 15 different biomarkers or 15 different things about your blood, and they'll do that to 50 people. They'll give one group the placebo, they give the other group the actual ingredient. And because they're testing so many things, just in terms of probabilities, one of them is fairly likely to come out better as a result of eating or taking this thing. So they'll just run lots and lots of tests until they find something that looks better when you're eating or doing this thing. And then they'll say, hey, here it is. This is our test that shows that red wine reduces blood pressure or something like that. It's just so scammy.
Oh, that's bizarre. Yeah, I never knew they did that.
It happens.
You can't trust anything.
Can't trust
anything.
That's right. And most of the research you read, like even there's lots of research on ingredients in FLCK, and you can't just trust one source because oftentimes when you look at the research paper, it was actually funded by the company that manufactures it or something like that.
Yes, after COVID, the amount of things that were like funded by Pfizer or funded by Johnson & Johnson, it was nuts.
Yeah. What a surprise to find out that the drug that we make money off came up good in our own research.
Yeah, exactly. I remember all of that when we all started digging a bit deeper and we're like, oh, hang on. I don't feel like this is. I feel like this is a bit bias.
Yeah, there's bias. So let's talk about therapy. I think that the first question I had on therapy was, is it more common now? It seems like everyone's doing some sort of therapy, particularly like psychologists. Do you think it's trendy now, or is it just we just hear about it?
So I've been in psychologists and psychiatrists my whole life, which makes me sound insane. But I have always had a really, really bad anxiety disorder. And the thing I found is I would go to psychologists and they would try and, like, my mum would take me when I was a kid and be like, she's got really bad anxiety. And they would try and just come up with some sort of big diagnosis to give me a pill. And one thing I was never going to do is go on medication because my entire family has a history with addictive personality. So if I start on something, that's it. So I was in and out of psychologists getting, like, at one point I was told I had abandonment-based mania.
What is that?
That's what we said. So I didn't go back because I was like, this is all just like, it's too much. And then I think therapy became more spoken about. And therapy is, I think, so much different to psychologists. Therapy really is talking to someone and talking about your lifestyle and talking about ways that you can more holistically, without medication, work through things that either you have tried to ignore and block and push to the back of your mind, or potentially just someone that knows how to push you in the direction you need to go in. And therapy, to me, it was always an American thing. Until the last few years, I did not know we did therapy in Australia. I thought it was psychologists, psychiatrists, and if you were American and you were like, you hear of all these like big celebrities that go to therapy. Mm-hmm. That is who I thought therapy was for. It was this weird American thing that we didn't do. And now I think it's more common because we're starting to realize that it is in Australia, but it is a much more sustainable, better option for people that don't just want to be on pills forever. And I think it's coming as well with the trend of so many people don't want to take birth control pills now. And so many people just want to be so much more in control of their body. So when it comes to their physical and mental health, what are my other avenues? And then spreading that information, because we are so much more willing now to be vulnerable. I feel like social media used to be so picture perfect, and TikTok changed all of that. Because Instagram, it was always very aesthetic and very, perfect. Whereas TikTok is about being vulnerable and raw and seeing someone's day-to-day life. So I think the way the social media landscape has changed, and also the way wellness has evolved, naturally has led us to this place where it seems more common, but it's just because it's so much more spoken about and so much more important to people.
Why did that change happen? Why are people more open to not being so curated now?
I think I've been in social media for so long, and you see this fatigue happen, and the picture perfect thing, people were getting tired of it. They were fatigued of that sort of content. So something had to change, and there were just a couple big influencers that became really raw, really vulnerable, and all of a sudden that changed the landscape. Okay. And I think that will keep happening. People will eventually get, tired of that raw and vulnerable content. We'll probably go back to your more 2012 Tumblr. And I think Tumblr was a big thing. Tumblr was a really big thing.
It was all teenagers posting about how depressed they were, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there were the Tumblr girls that were like the perfect blonde, like skating down on like those like picture perfect like Malibu roads and stuff. So it's just a whole different thing. And I think that's the other thing, like you said, people were posting about how depressed they were. You were either the depressed one or you were the perfect life, everything one. There was no mixing of the two.
Right. And which ones, you're saying, is it trendier now to be showed that you're depressed or to show that you're got everything under control?
I think it's a bit of a both. So Alex Earle, who is probably the biggest influencer of the moment, she came out saying that she takes medication for her anxiety.
Yeah.
And she is someone that seems like she has it so together. And then there'll be days where she forgets her medication and she'll say what a breakdown she has. And I think it's that awareness of you can be that put together, but sometimes you do need some help. Otherwise, this is what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting that it goes in these cycles. Like if you think back to, I guess, the 70s, which, I wasn't alive, but but you see it was very much hippies like that. That's how we see it, right? Hippies don't wear deodorant, don't bother putting clothes on and be all free and natural. And you get to the 80s and everything's like suits with shoulder pads and really like sharp things. And then you get to the 90s and then it goes back the other way. It's like grunge music and singing about how depressed you are, and all the heroes, musical heroes, shot or hung themselves, all kinds of stuff like that. I guess 2000s, not sure. And then you got 2010s, and I guess it just goes in this cycle of fashion, maybe.
Well, I think the 2000s was actually interesting because the 2000s, I think of things like Jersey Shore and the look that we would call heroin chic. And I think it was almost this era of like, it was the party girl era of Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton and all of those ones. So back then, I don't think people were talking about wellness because it wasn't cool to be well. It was cool to be on a 24/7 bender and getting DUIs and looking like Kate Moss, who survived solely off cigarettes.
Yeah.
So I do think that fashion and the cycles of fashion, like you said, massively impact the discussions we're willing to have.
Yeah. Do you think, were people in therapy back in 2000s?
Surely. I don't think it's that new a thing, but I genuinely wouldn't know. I have not heard of anyone talking about it until this, what we call the clean girl aesthetic came out, which was that the girl that does yoga and is into wellness and journals and goes to therapy and eats healthy food. And that is when I first started hearing about therapy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about, I should do some research on the numbers, but it feels to me like lots of people I know are in therapy now. But the thing is, for 5 years, I've done therapy, and I'm not sure what the name of this phenomenon is, but when you buy a blue car, all of a sudden everyone has blue cars. So is it the same with therapy? Is it just because, when we're doing a wellness podcast, for example, like now all of a sudden everyone has the same interests? I'm not sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know so many people now that are in therapy, or at least when I shared on social media when I started therapy, so many people saying that they've at least been looking into therapy. I think it's something now as well that people aren't just doing if they're sick. That's the other thing. I think when we used to think about psychologists and psychiatrists, you had an illness and you needed to address it. Whereas therapy, it's just like we have human experiences that are good and bad, and those bad things that happen might not be that extreme to somebody, but it still impacts their day of life and it still impacts their way of thinking, and they just want to address that. It's not that they have crippling depression or suicidal thoughts. It is just they want to improve their day-to-day life.
Yeah, there is that difference between fixing something that's broken or, addressing a problem versus being more proactive, which is usually better. So you said therapy all your life. Like, I mean, how early are we talking?
First time I went to because my anxiety has always been extreme, and no one in my family had it, and my mum just did not know. Like, I could not sleep in my own bed as a kid.
Wow.
I used to remember being like 5 and I thought I could see like spiders hanging off the roof, like giant spiders.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like I was like the scary child of like was seeing things, and it was all just anxiety. But even that back then, like to say now I have anxiety, it feels like every second person has anxiety.
Yeah.
That back then, it was like, what is wrong with you? Like, what do you mean you're having panic attacks and you can't breathe? Like, you were fine 2 seconds ago and now you're on the floor about to have a heart attack. Like, whereas now that's pretty normal too.
Wow, I had like 5.
As long as I can remember.
So, I mean, how did your parents approach it at the time? You went to a GP first, or?
Yeah, we got so many referrals and kind of nothing ever happened because from even like a very young age, it was like, take this pill. We can put you on this medication, or you can go see a psychiatrist who will also just put you on pills. There was no, here's how we can work through it. Here's some exercises. Or it was very much a blame game. I feel like it used to be of who made you this way? Why are you this way?
Right. Versus
it's no one's fault. It's just something that some people are predisposed to and they have anxiety. Yeah. I think the whole mental health space has shifted so drastically in such a positive way as well.
Yeah, the needing to know why one is interesting because, as we learn eventually, knowing the reasons why for things often doesn't, well, usually doesn't result in any
No.
progress in improving them, right?
No, and or it's you're just so stuck in that mindset of instead of okay, this is how your life is, let's improve it. It's like no, we need to find out why you are this way, and kind of just like drum into the problem. It just made no sense.
So when you say, have you had the same therapist or different therapists, and have you tried different? I guess there's like different modalities and things like this too, isn't there?
I tried so many. I found a really good, and this is the difference actually. I found a really good therapist about a year ago that I haven't seen in 10 months. Have not needed to see in 10 months because she just wanted to see me for 5 sessions and actually give me tools of when you are having a panic attack, this is what you can do. These are things that you should put in place for your anxiety. These are things that, don't, and like if there was someone that I was blaming because psychologists throughout my life have said this person has made you this way, she was very much about let go of it. All you're doing is giving yourself more anxiety by holding on to these things.
Yeah.
But she was the most new age therapist. She had dreadlocks. She lived on a farm in like rural Victoria with her like 10 miniature donkeys. Like she was new age. And she worked. She wasn't someone that had like some incredible degree and sat in an office all day. And, it was a remote thing where we did it via Zoom. And that was the difference in that versus what I have experienced when I go to the ones that are triple the price and meant to be triple as amazing was huge.
So you've been going to therapy for 15 years and all of a sudden you just 5 sessions with this one person and vastly improved.
Yeah, have not had to see her. And she's always like, if you need to see me, like we'll just do a Zoom, we can have a chat. But have not needed to, which is bizarre.
Wow. And so 10 months, you have not had to go to therapy for 10 months.
Have not seen her for 10 months. And it was about the same time just before I kind of started my wellness journey. And she almost spiraled that as well because she would speak so much about the correlation between the body and the mind. So many exercises that she gave me when I'm having a panic attack, instead of just kind of deep breathing, were like things like these like butterfly taps and stuff, like these real physical things to do. And she would talk about the power of food and mental health. That was a big thing with her as well. And no other doctors are ever talking about that. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a GP or a normal psychologist or a normal psychiatrist that has asked me, how active are you? Do you drink alcohol? What do you eat? What does your day-to-day lifestyle look like? They don't ask those questions.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be a surprise that if you watch TikTok play video games and order McDonald's on Uber Eats all day, every day, you're probably not going to feel that great mentally, right?
Yeah, and if you've got like through-the-roof cortisol, it's not going to help your mental health. But again, no one talks about that. I didn't even know what cortisol was until her. And I was like, this is insane. Like everything I'm doing is sparking my cortisol and I'm wondering why I have mental health issues, particularly anxiety and mood swings. It's like, oh, I'm not crazy. I am just not at all living a lifestyle that supports me being able to function like a normal, happy, productive human being.
Yeah. If you think back to when you were younger now, were there certain things that, like, were you not doing those things? Was there general low activity levels or cortisol things that you were doing?
It's actually interesting. I was actually a really fit, active kid. I think it's more my anxiety's gotten worse as I've gotten older.
Right.
So there could be that correlation between you're a child that lives a pretty stress-free life and you're playing outside and you're riding your bike and you're eating healthy food because your parents are making you versus you get older and you start to have the stresses of being an adult in life and you're not eating that great because you get to choose what goes in your body and all of a sudden you're drinking alcohol and, there are some days you get busy and you don't stand up for hours.
Yeah.
There probably is that correlation there.
The way you're born, certain things about you obviously have an impact as well. There's a really interesting study. I don't know what the reference is for it, but they took monkeys, and I think it was monkeys, some animal, and they stuck a probe in their stomachs to test how sensitive some nerve in their stomach was. And Then they watched these monkeys develop as they got older, and the funny thing was that the ones with the less sensitive stomach, all like statistically, they were all much more extroverted than the ones that were highly sensitive. And there was this kind of the theory that I've heard is that people who tend to be more introverted already quite sensitive to stimulus, and so they don't have a strong need to go out and get more stimulus. Whereas people who are a little bit less sensitive to stimulus, they're like, I'm bored. I need something because my nervous system is not getting enough. So they'll actively go out and find people to talk to and socialize and do things, which is interesting.
That would actually make a lot of sense. I mean, the whole introvert extrovert thing I think is bizarre anyway. I've always found that discussion bizarre.
Yeah, obviously it's never binary, right?
No, I think to either say you are introverted or extroverted, this is actually one of the things I think has not helped the mental health thing over the years. Labels. We are so much less stuck on labels now. It used to be you are introverted, you are extroverted, you have ADHD, you have anxiety, you have depression, you are these things. Now it's more I am me, and sometimes I struggle with anxiety. I am me, and in these scenarios I can be introverted, and in these scenarios I can be extroverted. I think there was, especially around like, I remember growing up when I was like 13, 14, 15, labels, even in diet, everyone was paleo or keto or vegan. We're much more fluid now, much happier to just go with life.
Yeah, it's definitely healthier because, yes, people's personalities are kind of fixed over their life. Like people do change, but not drastically usually. But everybody is much more flexible and fluid and dynamic than we give them credit for. You know, like even the most introverted people can be extroverted and you know could live such a life that they would be a completely different person. So environment plays a big factor.
Yeah, 100%. Environment's huge.
So the most effective therapy you found was someone telling you that therapy is not the answer and you just like work on lifestyle. Is that
pretty much? This therapist, it was like, and she did say there are some pretty like extreme but not as extreme as taking pills therapy methods you can go down if you need to, but her thing was first like, see if you can address this through lifestyle. Like it is as simple as that, and if you can't, that's when we support you more. We don't throw everything at you, and then if that doesn't work, you then have this feeling of helplessness and that you are just a broken human being because yes, we've thrown a band-aid pill at you, but we haven't addressed anything else. You know, if 99% of your lifestyle is making you feel terrible and you are relying on this pill, even if it does make you feel better, you're still going to have that subconscious that I need that pill. If I don't have it, then, you know, I can't function like a normal human being. And then if, you know, God forbid you went somewhere and you forgot it or you lost it, or then what? Then you're just stuffed. And that was her thing, is that, and your diagnosis can become who you are. So many people get told they have depression and they almost use that as an excuse to think, well, I can't. It limits their life because they believe that's who they are.
Yeah.
And so many times it isn't. You have depressive tendencies or depressive symptoms because of something else. So her thing was, and like some people do have really extreme depression. I know my anxiety isn't necessarily a side effect. I have anxiety disorder. That is me. But there are still lifestyle things I can do to fix that versus just jumping at pills. I think that's the biggest thing. We have definitely come to a place that pills are, there is no stigma around them. Like Alex earlier, if you need them, have them. But if you are someone that doesn't want to have them, we have options now.
That must be true for all kinds of medicines, right? Like, okay, sure, if you were born with type 1 diabetes, no choice. But for so many, you know, so there are conditions where without medication you'll die, but there's so many other things where you can manage your lifestyle in such a way that you can avoid having to have that pill or whatever as a crutch.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that really stuck with me, which I'm not against chemo, radiation, any of that, but a client of mine had terminal brain cancer. And they said to her, you need to, throw everything at it. And she just said, it's not who I am. I don't believe in it. I'm going to, she decided she would fast. She did 7-day water fasts.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of just natural stuff. And has been clear for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And that to me was pretty crazy because that's, I think, one of those things where it is hard to fathom the human body can heal itself so much. Because that is one thing where you think if you have terminal cancer, that's it. You need all the help you can get. And when you hear stories like that, it's like, okay, if sometimes the body can naturally find ways and you can work out ways to kind of support your body through that, then something like anxiety or depression, maybe I can also, surely that's kind of been something that's stuck with me because it is like, well, if you're able to do that, I can probably do it too on a much less extreme scale.
Yeah, well, I mean, just keeping you alive is a pretty incredible thing that your body does every day. I mean, essentially, if you get chemotherapy, but they're just giving you lots of poisons and hoping that they kill more cancer cells than non-cancer cells, right? Like which, I don't know what the stats are, but obviously it's effective for some people, but a lot of people still just die from it. So you have to make that personal choice how you want to tackle any illness or deal with your own problems.
Yeah, and I think even so after the COVID vaccine, I got pericarditis.
Wow, okay.
Like the day after, and I was rushed to hospital and got there and they said there's nothing we can do. You just have to work through this. And that was even bizarre because it's like, what do you mean there's no pill you can give me to fix this? Like my lungs are not working. And they're like, no, you just have to, nothing we can do. And you go, well, you can the amount of healing the human body can do, it's insane.
I mean, you can break a bone.
Yeah, even that, it just
joins itself back together.
It's weird. And if you think too hard about it, it gets a bit scary.
Yeah, talking about therapy. So you've done, how many therapists have you been to then?
6, maybe,
okay,
that I can think of.
And sometimes they give you, you've been to a psychiatrist, they're giving you meds?
Not psychiatrist. That was one thing I was like, no psychiatrist. But that's only psychologist. The amount of GPs I would have gone to. And my mum being like, look, we just want someone that's going to just talk to the kid. Not tell her that she's insane or try and give her a tablet.
Yeah, wow, okay. So 6 therapists, and did you find that it just didn't really help that much until this last one?
They all would just give me a label. That's it. Right. I'd walk in and I'd say, I know I have anxiety, and I'd walk out and all of a sudden it's like, and you've got ADHD, and you've got depression, and you've got mania. And it's like...
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Now what? Nothing? Okay.
Right, and they wouldn't give you anything to work with, anything to...
No, they just want to refer me.
Yeah.
That was it. We can refer you to someone that specialises in this, or they were happy to chat. It was just that blame game of who made you this way. It was like an interrogation. It was very strange.
Yeah, my experience probably a little bit different. I mean, I grew up in the 80s.
80s was good though, wasn't it? Wasn't it like puberty blues was 70s? 80s was all right.
Yeah, I mean, my childhood was pretty happy.
I feel like you need to give context of what the 80s was like.
What was the 80s like?
Because I only know 70s.
It seemed like every adult woman, including my mum, had a perm, shoulder pads.
Yeah, now I'm getting the image. When you say I grew up in the 80s, now I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, the sorts of, I guess, Top Gun is from the 80s. Kids' movies like Labyrinth, a lot of the early Disney movies. Well, no, probably actually, they're probably even older. What else is in the 80s? I mean, computers were a new thing.
Yeah, so no social media, no Instagram.
No, there was no, I remember very well the day my brother was in university. My brother's a bit older. I was in early high school, and he came home with this box, and he's like, "There's this new thing. It's called the internet."
Stop it. Like, I just can't. It's like my stepdad used to say that he would put his phone, because it was so big, in the boot of his car.
Yeah, car phones. Car phones are pretty. Yeah. Here's a funny one. It was well known that if you had a mobile phone, you're a wanker.
Oh, see, that's so. It's bizarre.
They'd be like, what a pretentious wanker walking around with his mobile phone, which was probably true, because who are you going to call?
Yeah, not everyone has one.
And now if you don't have a mobile phone, people are like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So yeah, I grew up in the 80s. I don't know anyone who went to therapy. I didn't even really hear about therapy. And my opinion of it, even, you just wouldn't do it. And it was like, if you needed someone to help you control your own brain, why can't you do it yourself? But that's probably a bit of a unhealthy unhealthy pathology that I have in terms of how I think about that stuff. So yeah, you just wouldn't do it. When I was having, I guess, like teenage, like growing up and being unhappy sort of stuff, when my parents took me to the doctor, when I was little, they would take me to the doctor and you'd be allergic to things. And then that went through my whole life. When I was like 15, I had this big battery of allergy tests, and they said allergic to all these different things. And then they put me on immunotherapy, where they would take all the things you're allergic to and they would put it into a syringe. And every week they would inject you with a little bit more of it.
To like desensitize the body.
Yeah.
Is that the theory? Like over time the body gets used to it and...
Yeah, and there's a lot of research behind it. It works. But so for me, it was like dusts and pollens and stuff like that. But I wonder how much of that is just different eras, that we see things a different way. Like once upon a time, if your kid seemed unhappy, it was because they shouldn't be eating eggs or something like that.
Red cordial. It used to be like the amount of kids that probably had ADHD and their mum was like, that one can't eat red cordial.
Yeah. All that funny stuff. So then I think probably about 7 or 8 years ago, the company I was working at had coaching for everyone, which is almost like is the career version of a life coach.
Oh yeah, like did you have at school careers counsellors?
No, it was school. School was when I went to school. I don't know. They didn't help us. Not my memory is them not helping us with anything.
Yeah, right. Well, we had like a career life coach at school, so probably sounds a bit similar.
I went to a Catholic school, so sometimes they would want to have a chat with you about God or something. Maybe that's so, pretty much.
Oh, that's so funny.
So we had this like career coaching, and they had it for a couple of years before I decided to do it, because again, like in my head, it's like I shouldn't need anyone to help me with any of this stuff, right? Like eventually I went and did it, and had an amazing coach that I worked with. Her name was Sarah, and I changed my opinion on that. Prior to that, I had done a bunch of different physical therapies.
Yeah, this I find interesting. So what are the physical therapies? Physical therapies?
I think I've done them all. I'm pretty sure.
All? How many are there?
I mean, there's so many. And I don't know how I got, for some reason when I was at uni, I don't know why. I had long breaks. So I was doing a double degree and I had long breaks between classes. I'd be there like 8 till 6 every day, and I'd have like these 2 or 3 hour gaps occasionally. So I'd go to the library. I should have been at the bar having a drink, but anyway, I would go to the library and I'd read stuff. And so the first one, I had some, don't know what it was from, playing football, something like that. I had a bit of back and neck pain that was quite distressing. So the first thing I did some physiotherapy. But he did a like chiropractic sort of adjustment on my back. But then that feels great for like a day, and then you feel the pain comes back straight away.
Right. So it was working, but it wasn't working as well as it needed to be working.
I mean, I think it's the same as a pill, right? Like you can do a thing to improve something like now.
Yeah.
But it's not addressing the underlying problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I did something called Alexander Technique.
You've mentioned this before, and I still don't know what it is.
So when you do a class, probably about 3/4 of that class is you sit down on a chair and stand up again, and the teacher fixes the way you do it.
Oh, that sounds like it would drive you insane.
It's bizarre.
How long are you doing this for? 3.5 hours?
No, so it's just like an hour. And then they make you you have to practice it as well. But the idea is that you've got different types of muscles. Like there's like voluntary muscles that, like you move your arm or something. But a lot of your erector, spinae, whatever your spinal muscles, things like this, your neck, like you don't have to think about holding your neck up. Yeah. And the more you try and, if someone tells you to fix your posture, like if someone's standing there and you're like, oh, you're slouching, fix it, and you watch what they do, the thing they'll do will be worse.
I'm always being told to fix my posture, so I'm going to grab that, and next time someone says it to me, I'm going to say I'm actually making the problem worse.
Yeah, if you voluntarily try and fix the posture, because you're trying to think your way through involuntary, like muscles that you don't really have conscious control over generally.
Because I would straight away just do the whole shoulders back, sit up taller, and I can feel it in my core, and my lower back's already on fire, and I can do that for 2 seconds, and then I'm back to slouching.
Yeah, so you'll go into some weird pose, and if you actually took a photo of that, you'd be like, that doesn't look comfortable, and it's not. And in fact, generally, if you try and hold that pose all day, you'll have all kinds of pain, and you'd be a real mess.
Yeah, and a lot of people would say you're just needing to build those muscles. Like if you do that, you're going to build your core muscle, and it's like a workout.
Yeah. So Alexander Technique is generally, I haven't done teacher training. I did a lot of classes, haven't done teacher training. So any experts out there, don't get mad at me. But the idea is that you learn to not do the things that are a problem instead of trying to overcompensate and do something else to fix it.
Yeah, so addressing the root of the problem, actually what is going wrong versus just do it right.
Yeah, so when
Makes a lot of sense.
See someone, you're like, they seem to be slouching, but if they're slouching, it's probably muscular tension. The wrong muscles are doing something. So you need to teach that person to just let the right muscles do their thing and sort of train them through repetition, but you can't train them through like hold it tense, because that's counterproductive.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so I did a bunch of that, and that made a really big difference to a lot of neck pain I was having, and that was kind of I was hooked. I did Feldenkrais as well.
What's that?
Feldenkrais has 2 different things. There's the exercises you can do yourself, and there's the exercises that you can do with an instructor. A lot of the ones you do by yourself, and the book on this is called Awareness Through Movement. And the idea, it's kind of really about teaching you better sensory awareness of where your body is. So you'll do these really controlled and slow movements.
Okay, so it's almost like Pilates in the sense that it's about being aware of small movements.
Yeah. So you do this, they're not weighted, you do these small movements. There's a lot of circular stuff as well. And one of the interesting things you do there is that you will do it on one side, and then you'll visualize yourself doing it with the other side of the body. Yeah,
right. Also, there's that mental side of it as well. It's not all necessarily physical.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big thing that, once we get into some of the other physical therapies, that we don't know how most of them work. And sometimes we debate whether they do. So I did Feldenkrais. I had a book on applying Feldenkrais to running, and it made my running technique 10 times better. It was amazing.
How long had you been running for prior to doing that? Like, have you always been a runner, or were you kind of just like jogging around?
always been pretty natural at running, but it just, it teaches you. One of the things they're teaching you is this rotational connection between your upper body and your lower body when you run, and how to get used to that. So yeah, did Feldenkrais. That was great. Other stuff. I mean, I've had a chiropractor for a while. Don't really rate it. Some of them might be good, but I just find anything that you just treat like medicine, like where it's you come in and we fix a thing and you go away. I find those therapies less appealing.
Yeah, which makes sense.
So I did that. I did acupuncture, and acupuncture. I got what the therapist called needle shock. So she was putting the needles in, and I was like, fine. I didn't care that the needles were going in. But then for some reason, just I got really cold and started like shivering uncontrollably and just freaked the hell out.
Holy. And you've got needles in you, so you'd be thinking I'm dying. They've like hit a nerve or something. Like this is it.
I could tell it was in my head.
Oh, okay. So you've got that rational brain. You obviously haven't got the...
But I was freaking the hell out. And so I saw her twice, and then she was like, probably not for you. She referred me to an osteopath. And when I went to the osteopath, that was the first time anyone did red light therapy on me, which now it's everywhere.
I was about to say every sauna, everything is red light.
I guess this was probably 10 years ago, just doing red light. But she also did something called proprioceptive deep tendon reflex.
That's a mouthful.
I don't know if I've mentioned this before. It's called PDTR. And the idea is if you might have injured something or hurt something somewhere. And then because of that, in your nervous system, your body's going to carry around this certain way of moving or doing stuff that's no longer, it was there to protect an injury at one point, but is no longer serving a valuable purpose. And it's actually getting in the way.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't even know exactly what she was doing, but she would, wherever the problem was, and she would like dig a finger in, and then she would like tap you on the head or click in front of your eye or in your ear, like, and try and distract you while she performed some like manipulation where the problem was.
I was about to say that one sounding more, we're going down the like voodoo sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's probably as weird as it got. I saw another guy who did a bunch of these things. Like he had this list of therapies that he was practiced in. I saw another guy who did a bunch of these things. Like he had this list of therapies that he was practiced in. The last time I went to a session with him, and I'm sure it was fine, but it was like, I thought it was like, what the hell is this? He did ask permission first, but he spent, I'd say, 15 minutes with his hand in my mouth.
What?
Yeah, he put gloves on, but he was like, "Oh, I just." Yeah.
I would have been like, "What are you doing?"
He was like, he explained it was something about like, your jaw is you're carrying some tension in your jaw that's like offside, and to fix the problem in your knee, I was like, okay.
15 minutes a long time though. By that point, it's like your jaw's hurting more and the problem's worse.
It was a long time. I'm sure it was more awkward for me than it was for him. But anyway, that was, yeah. And I can't remember what that therapy was called. I did that. I've done Bowen therapy. Bowen therapy is a really weird one that they just touch you really lightly.
Yeah, right.
That's an hour. It's just like.
Oh, that's very much that like kind of energy, sort of like your Reikis and your kinesiology and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's going down that path.
Yeah, and is that all of them? I mean, I've been Rolfed as well.
Yeah, you spoke about this last time. That just sounds weird. It just sounds.
And the premise behind it is that you have adhesions like between your fascia and your muscle. It's not very hydrated or lubricated sometimes. And so when you have this pain, and so their idea is they go in there and they shear across the muscle. Like normally a massage, they're nice to the muscle. They go like against it and they're quite hard and they have this like sticky stuff on their hands. So the idea is that they get rid of these adhesions this way.
Yeah, okay.
When I've done research on all of these things, the interesting thing is that none of them are scientifically valid. So my understanding and kind of with the research I've done, I'm sure there's plenty of people who've done a lot more research, but when I say, well, they're all bullshit. And what I mean by bullshit is that the way that they claim they work is never true.
Yeah, so the therapy doesn't necessarily not work, but it doesn't do what it's saying it's going to do.
Yeah, like acupuncture actually does have evidence that for pathologies it produces results, right? But you don't have fucking energy lines running through your body that get blocked and all. Like so the voodoo part of it is just garbage, but all these therapies that have a rich tradition of being effective, generally a lot of them are really effective for certain things. It's just that the mystical way that they were claimed to work was just mysticism. It wasn't the reality.
That's interesting. So it's not that it's necessarily lying. It's almost just like everything needs to be updated in how we talk about it and what we say it does.
Yeah, and that they're useful for certain things, like chiropractic adjustments. People, if you walk out of there feeling a lot better, wow, that's amazing. But the idea that the bones in your spine have gotten out of position, you need to push them back into position is just garbage. Like you can't. You can. If people have scoliosis, they can very gradually over time improve spinal alignment through lots of physical therapy and lots of targeted weightlifting and stuff like that. But you can't have a bone out of alignment and then go into a office and someone clicks it and you're like, now, I mean, if it's dislocated, yes, but like for general.
The out of alignment, I feel like, is used in so many things. Something's out of alignment. Your energy's out of alignment. Your aura's out of alignment. Your bones are out of alignment.
Yeah. And it's all bullshit. I think there's some I have never tried, like craniosacral therapy and some of these other ones. But, like the best explanation I've found is that if you're paying attention to what's happening and you're getting some sort of sensory input, that can help with all kinds of things. Yeah, which is why you can even do that in the gym. You go to the gym and you're focusing on how you do the exercise and you're like thinking about it and you're really dialed in. So good for you.
Yeah, or that form over ego lifting.
Yeah, if you go to the gym and you walk on the treadmill while you watch soap operas, probably not going to help. So
yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah. So that was my experience with physical therapies. I'm sure there's some others I've done, but that was the interesting ones.
I mean, I didn't realize how many there were of them.
Oh, there's way more. There's something I never found an instructor for it, but I did read the book. I did some. It's called Tragomentastics, and that was really strange.
Stranger than the hands in the mouth, or not that strange?
Okay, probably not. One of the exercises you would do is jump as high as you could. Jump as high as you could, and the goal was to land as softly as possible. And you would do this with reps. So like if I can jump up and not hear myself when I land, then it's like that's all kinds of weird stuff.
I was going to say my biggest thing with physical therapy is I wonder how much that would help versus the average person building more muscle and having less body fat. Because I know a lot of my stuff, the more muscle I build, suddenly my lower back doesn't hurt. Suddenly I'm more mobile, I'm more flexible. If I lose body fat, all of a sudden I don't feel so sluggish. I feel like I've got more energy. Like I wonder how much of it is... Like I know whenever because I think I've tried a chiro once and I was definitely like the most unfit of my life. And I was just sore. And I was just not fit and I was not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think going to a chiro once versus working out every day, it's pretty obvious which one's gonna. So I think I definitely agree. I think the interesting that when you say if you just add muscle, if you go to the gym, so I'll just take the example of like gym bros that just go and do bench press every day or something, right?
Yeah, the most jacked of
Yeah.
jacked.
So if all you do is you go and work the same muscle, and it might be a vanity muscle. Yeah, for men, I guess might be pecs or shoulder. If all you did was bicep curls all day, I'd say you'd probably end up less healthy.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's something about being able to train your whole body and do all kinds of different things. I think variety matters, which like I did CrossFit. I still do it a bit. Interesting thing, when I started doing CrossFit, I could not even do a proper squat.
Well, CrossFit's tough. I tried it. I think I did 2 classes.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not doing those squats properly, you are stuffed. You can't get away with CrossFit and having bad form and not leaving there crippled.
Yeah, you will hurt yourself for sure. Well, one thing I did learn actually is I guess I would have started doing it maybe not 10 years ago, but it's a long time. And I can do everything much better. I had a lot of injuries for a long time, which is part of why I went to so many therapists. I also went to physio, and I had an exercise physiologist for a while, which is someone who like kind of watches you move and then gives you a program of exercises to do. I had a stretching program for a while, which was like the worst idea ever because it just messed me up. I'm not a big fan of like intense stretching. There's plenty of former yoga instructors out there who have like debilitating spinal and hip problems. It's I mean, stretching is good, just like if you're just really cranking on the joints all the time. So yeah, but all of the tissues that you have will remodel over time. Like muscles have the shortest, like it's quite quick. But even things like if you, and I know this because I had Achilles tendonitis at one point, and Achilles tendonitis. So I was doing a lot of CrossFit. I was also training for like competitive 5Ks, and I started getting some pain while I was running in the back of my heel, which is where your Achilles tendon is. And I was just like, no pain, no gain. Like just push through it. It got so bad. I was on a 5K once, and I actually just had to stop. It was just excruciating. So I had to learn about how, like, what's happening there, and your tendon fibers are in a nice like alignment. It's like a strong tendon. The fibers are aligned properly, and when you work similar to how you work a muscle, like the tendon gets worked, it gets strained, and the fibers break down a bit as it's getting worked, and then it'll rebuild over time. But it rebuilds quite slowly, which means that what can happen is if you're overtraining, then the tendon starts to break down and it's not repairing properly, and you end up with all these misaligned fibers in the tendon. Yeah, I was working it repetitively in the wrong way. I wasn't giving it a chance to rest. And then what happens is it gets inflamed and it gets this pathology where it's just like now all of a sudden it's almost making itself worse. And rest isn't going to help and nothing's going to help. So I had to do this whole program of exercises to slowly strengthen it back up and sort of repair the alignment. But you can do that, and that's with the tendon. There's even some evidence around that things like cartilage will also it's a long time scale. But one of the things that you hear often is, I've got a cartilage defect and I have one in my knee, and they're just like unfixable. But I did exercises and exercises and exercises, trained it, and like years later, it's all fine. People who have spinal problems, like you always meet someone who's got a back problem, right? And one of the things that happens, and this goes to, and I find this really interesting because it talks about how you were saying that they give you a label, and now you're depressed, and it's like now you're stuck with it. So people go and get scans on their spine, and the doctor will say, "Yep, you've got a disc bulge, or you've got something wrong somewhere in your spine." And now they're like, "Okay, now I can't do exercise. Now I can't do anything." And it pathologizes them and says they've got this illness. They did a study where they took a whole bunch of people, and they didn't. It wasn't basically they took all kinds of people, and they looked at their spines, and they assessed. They assessed everyone's spine, who's got the defect, who doesn't, and separately they asked, who's got chronic back pain, and there were people who had chronic back pain. I don't know if that one was, no. There were lots of people with no chronic back pain who had the exact same defects as people who had chronic back pain. So people who they're just happy going about their life. They don't think anything's wrong with them. And they're like, your spine looks exactly the same as this person who's in constant agony. It's like, how on earth does that work?
Oh, that's weird. Because that is a physical, there is something actually physically wrong there, and some people just don't even think it.
Yeah. It's the same is true for cartilage defects in shoulders and things like this. There are lots of things sure, if your spine has been severed, no one's ignoring that.
Yeah, you probably can't ignore that.
But these small defects that cause chronic pain, the relationship between the defect and the chronic pain for minor things is often not very clear at all, which is how, but the thing is that as soon as you go to a doctor and say, I've got this problem, and they go, that's because you've got X and X is not fixable, you're stuck.
Yeah, and you become X.
Yeah.
Everything you do is, if you want to go on a roller coaster, can I do that because I have this? Or can I go on that long run because I have this? All of a sudden you're suddenly questioning everything you can do in life because this thing has become you.
Limits you as a person and just makes you, it just pathologizes you as a sick person, right? Which is, Back to therapy. Should we talk about therapy some more?
Yeah.
So you would normally just go and talk to therapists, they just give you like CBT or these things, or is always
just your normal therapist. The one thing I actually think has revolutionized the mental health space has been the legalization of marijuana in America. The amount of people that have gotten off medications or had even physical problems and physical pains that have been able to find that, and it's changed their life. I think that has massively been something that has pushed us in this direction of we need to reassess what is a drug, because that antidepressant that can kill someone if they overdose on it, and they are now incredibly dependent on it, and they have that lethal pot of drugs sitting in their bathroom 24/7, maybe that is more dangerous for someone than taking, however many mils of CBD oil or marijuana oil they need to take.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can go to your cupboard and overdose on Panadol, right? That's...
Yeah. So I think that's been a huge thing. I think it's just a big shift of what was once upon a time a stoner's drug is now healing people. That has raised the conversation of what can we do to modernize and change the mental health space. And I think that also ties in with therapy becoming so much more popular because more people are having these discussions and having these considerations of what can we be doing.
Why do you think something like either marijuana or psychedelics, things like this, some people believe in, using psychedelics as some sort of therapy. Why do you think this, what is it? Why does it work?
I think so. I'm someone that if marijuana was legal in Australia, I would happily try that. The thought of trying a plant over a big pharma pill, I am much more comfortable with that. Way more comfortable. Yeah. I think it's that element of one is so heavily manufactured, and like you were saying before, their research is done by themselves. They are these multi-billion-dollar companies that at the end of the day, they just want to make profit. Yeah. Whereas a marijuana plant's going to grow. People are profiting off it, but at the end of the day, it isn't manufactured. It's grown and it's there, and people see massive, improvements in their life. And what worst case scenario, you're going to green out if you have too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I get.
You're not going to die from it. Well, I shouldn't say that. Someone probably has died from it, but I would much rather have too much marijuana in my system than take too many antidepressants.
Yeah, no, I think that's it would probably be a wiser choice.
I think that's where a lot of it's coming from, of just that people are so much more conscious of what am I trusting and who am I trusting to give me these things to put in my body. And we are at a point, especially post-COVID, that people would rather trust the plant that grows in the ground.
Do you think, though, I know I definitely agree, and there's a long history of marijuana use in lots of cultures. It's pretty safe. I don't think you can actually OD on it. I'm sure someone's got really stoned and crashed their car or something like that. But like a lot of medicines, not all, but like a lot of them are plant derived. Like Disprin, that comes from some bark of a plant somewhere. Opiates as well, originally from poppy, from plants. So a lot of the drugs we have these days were found in a plant somewhere. So where's the line, or what's the? Do you think it's the commercialization that corrupts, like makes it worse? Where does it go bad?
Yeah, I think it's what you're saying. Like originally, that's where it comes from. I think it's in that process of who are you trusting with this? What else has happened to it? And I think if you're someone that, is very into the research side of things, you'd feel a lot better off with it. I know if I tried to research these sort of things, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense to me. There is still going to be this element of trust that I have to trust someone who's putting my best interest at heart. And I don't think they, majority of the time, are putting the person's best interest at heart. They're prioritizing making money. And that's where I think it gets iffy. It's how much can I really trust you? Versus this, to me, feels like I'm putting a lot more of my own fate in my hands and researching what marijuana is and the risks of that. It's probably like even when you get birth control pills, you can read about all the risks, but there's hundreds of them. You get this fold-out piece of paper that's like A3, and it's like, here are all your risks and side effects. And over time, people are going, hang on, like this is, thanks for telling me, but shit, like this is insane. I think it's the same with drugs. It's like, here's all the risks, like we're telling you, but it's like, God. And if you mix that with that, then, this happens. And
so for you, it's about the safety profile and the effectiveness of what you're taking. If it's a pharmaceutical, could be masked terribly by the pharmaceutical company just because it's financially motivated.
Yeah, and I think even so, I know someone that has got the prescription marijuana for sleep in Australia.
Yeah.
And they used to take sleeping tablets and drink because they take their sleeping tablets, but they didn't want to lose that lifestyle factor of drinking. Two things you should not be mixing.
No.
As soon as they started taking the marijuana, they didn't want to drink.
Yeah.
It gave them that kind of feeling of what alcohol would give them. Plus it helped them sleep. It got rid of all these other things. All of a sudden, instead of having to mix concoctions and take multiple pills, they had this one thing that they were like, oh my God, I'm actually able to go to sleep. I don't need a bottle of red wine. I'm waking up feeling more productive. My anxiety, as soon as I take this from about 4 o'clock, I'm mellow and looking forward to going to bed, and I feel rested and relaxed.
Yeah.
So it's even things like that, whereas they were taking a pill in the morning to wake up, so that they were up and functioning because they had a terrible sleep from being groggy from their sleeping tablet at night time, an anti-anxiety, and a bottle of wine.
Yeah, especially a lot of the old sleeping tablets were like benzos. So if you a fistful of benzos and a bottle of wine, it's a pretty good way to kill yourself.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do. I mean, even like I had, what's that really full-on painkiller you get?
Yeah, so really a strong opiate, yeah.
Endos. I had endos from, I can't remember what I did. I had a horse riding accident, went out to a birthday party and drank. And the next day, it wasn't until my mum was like, you weren't drinking last night, were you? And I was like, yeah.
Wow,
She was
okay.
like, you should not. Doctors didn't even tell me. So I think just the fear of what can go wrong with pills and drugs versus marijuana, it just feels safer to me as well.
Yeah, I've got a couple of there's anecdotes, but on one both ways. So interestingly, I sprained my foot or something. I was playing football and I injured it and I couldn't walk on it. And at the time, the doctor gave me something called Vioxx, which he was like, and he had like a Vioxx pen on his desk and like promotional. So obviously he was, obviously the drug company like sent him a bunch of paraphernalia and he's like, cool, now I'm going to prescribe it. So he gave me Vioxx and it was about 2 years after that. And I took the whole dose and I was like, whatever. A couple of years after that, it got banned. And it got banned because Vioxx and Celebrex were these two non-steroidal anti-inflammation drugs, like NSAIDs, which is what ibuprofen, Nurofen is one of them. So they had these two other ones that were like, I think how long it stays in your system is much shorter with Nurofen. So they would have these other ones. They had these two, and the doctor gave me when I was on it for like a month. They took it off the market because a lot of people who had arthritis that were taking them were dying of heart attacks.
See, that's like my biggest fear of you get given a pill and then something comes out and like a car being recalled, all of a sudden you have been toying with your life. That's really scary.
Yeah, and it's just these drugs, they're high dose, and that's I think dose dependence is a lot of it. So then to talk about marijuana quickly, at two different points in my life, I've had friends who I would say were dosing their marijuana stupidly high. So I had a friend in high school, I haven't seen him for a while, but first thing he would do when he woke up, smoke weed. And then after breakfast, and I swear it was, he used to smoke a bong and it would be, I reckon, 15 times a day he'd be smoking a bong.
Holy!
Could not sleep. Him and his friends, I went to a party with them once, and apart from all the other drugs they were taking, they would pass out drunk and then they would wake each other up and hand the other person a bong and they would smoke more weed, and it was just insane.
Oh my, it's like something out of a movie.
Yes, it was pretty bad. And then later on, got a friend I haven't seen for a couple of years, another friend that had some emotional trauma, but they used to tell me they needed to smoke weed to go to sleep. And I was always like, okay, that's probably just, they just like, they have a joint, they have a puff or something. And it was a bong and they would do 6 cones to go to sleep. And I was just like,
just to go to sleep.
Just to go to sleep. And they couldn't do it without it. They could not sleep without, like, it wasn't just one, it wasn't just a little bit. I think it's one of those things where lots of these things are healthy, but it has to be integrated into your life. If I guess we talked about this before, if how many cones you have in a day becomes your whole life, big problem. Doesn't matter what it is, actually. If it becomes a focus of your life, whether it's water, exercise, I think anything, if it takes over, just is not healthy.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, even orthorexia, which is the obsession of eating healthy and being active, and healthiest thing you can do. You do too much of that, it is a recognised disorder. Yeah, you can always take things too far. It is more just for me, even when I hear that, would I rather take marijuana too far or sleeping pills too far?
If you take marijuana too far, you'll probably just buy lots of snacks. If you take sleeping tablets too far, you'll be dead.
Yeah, because I think that's the issue, is that your tolerance does obviously get higher, but that happens no matter what you take. And I think that's the scary part of pills, and why I never wanted to go down that road, is I have an addictive personality, and you tie that in with something that I am going to have to alter my dose as I go. All it takes is someone being like, no, you know, my tolerance is here now, I'm fine, I can handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we were having so many heroin overdoses. Like, I remember growing up hearing about all the heroin overdoses in Melbourne in, like, must have been maybe the 70s. A while ago.
You don't hear about them anymore, do you? I'm sure they still happen.
No, but they were saying that was the issue, is that people just assumed their tolerance could handle it.
Yeah, and then they get what they think is heroin. It's actually fentanyl or something, and then, Well, I think then last thing, do you think, could this happen with therapy as well? Be like, all of a sudden, I've got to go to therapy every day.
100%. And that's why I loved that my therapist, the goal was just to give me tools. I think there are so many therapists that it's done. Okay, cool. Same time next week. Next week. And it's like, you need to come to me weekly and we need to maintain this forever. And that is just, I think sometimes it's probably with good intention and sometimes it's a money pit.
Yeah, I really like that that therapist, like her goal was to get you out of there.
Yeah, it was just to move me through. And there was no, do you want to do a session this week? There's no follow-ups of that kind of pushy, like, it's just you reach out when you need to, if you need to.
Yeah, that way you become a functioning human instead of a disease.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. I think that probably covers it for this week.
Yeah, we would have a lot of rambling there that we can sort through. We're better to have more than less.
Yeah, I think, realistically, if you look at the stats, no one's watching it, but the outtakes do get eyeballs, and I think that's the main thing.
Well, I listened to a podcast the other day. The average podcast takes 50 episodes to get listeners. So we're nearly a fifth of the way there. And we're not the most consistent. So it'll take us probably another couple of years to get to 50, the way that we go.
We probably average about once every 2 weeks.
I reckon. Once every 11 days. We'll give ourselves that. I don't think it's 2 weeks.
Okay.
We always make sure it's not quite 2 weeks.
11 days, so it's going to take us like 500 days. Yeah, okay.
Oh, that's worse than I thought. I thought I was kidding when I said years. That's more than...
Well, look forward to a year and a bit of figuring it out.
See ya.